If you watched Abducted in Plain Sight and were like, what in the hey diddle diddle am I watching, but I can't look away, then you are going to consider this case like the sequel, the Sarah Lawrence Scandal Edition. Y'all, today we are going to be talking about a Sarah Lawrence scandal that has taken place. The person at the center of this is named Lawrence Larry Ray. Y'all, he is currently incarcerated. He is charged with like a plethora of crimes related to this and all the victims involved in this case. Now, one of the things that is interesting about this is what blew the lid off of this case and brought it to light was an amazing piece of investigative journalism by Ezra Marcus and James Walsh. Now, I posted the link to their article down in the description, as well as a couple of other articles that I thought were really interesting if you want to go in like a really deep dive, more details into this, because it's not 100% playing out in court yet. It looks like it is going to be like a federal type of crime. So, you know, we're probably not going to see the trial firsthand, but it will be a very intriguing one to watch. That being said, I'm going to talk about aspects of this case, of this story that really jumped out to me and made me say, what in the hell am I reading? Okay, so let's start with what happened. February 11th, 2020, so not that long ago, Lawrence Larry Ray was indicted by federal prosecutors. Now, he is facing like 9 federal charges. Y'all, he could basically spend the rest of his life in prison if he gets hooked on all these. Now, these charges range from sex trafficking, conspiracy to commit extortion, forced labor, money laundering. I mean, you name it, this guy is heinous. So let's start with how this happened. We're just going to call him Larry from here on out to make it easier. So Larry had a daughter named Talia Ray. She went to Sarah Lawrence College. Sarah Lawrence College is like this little private liberal arts college up in New York. Now, it sounded like Talia was like kind of the leader of her group of friends. And one year they're like, hey girl, we need to find a place to live. And she was like, I am on it. So she found them some on-campus housing called Slonim Woods No. 9. Now, during this, her father was incarcerated. And she was like spinning this story to her friends and stuff, which she probably believed herself, which was basically like, you know what, my dad's in prison. He's going to be getting out soon. You know, he basically went there to save us from our horrible mother. And, you know, almost like painting this martyr type picture of him. Also woven into this tale was like the corrupt government being after her dad. And, you know, kids being kids, they probably really didn't pay that too much attention to that. So then Larry gets out of prison and he moves into the housing with his daughter and her friends. Don't worry, we will be talking about what Sarah Lawrence has to say about the father living in the dorm with the kids. So Larry moves in and he has these grand stories. To me, it almost sounded like, you know, Mission Impossible dad moving in and telling these grand stories of his, you know, amazing connections and these crazy adventures he's been on all throughout the world. Now, also at the same time, these students that he was around, like a lot of young people, you know, they haven't really been exposed to the world that much yet. So they're kind of naive. You know, they're exploring ideas and thoughts. So for me, it sounded like, you know what, they probably were giving this guy the benefit of the doubt. Like, this isn't some horrible person. This is a highly manipulative man. I mean, extremely manipulative. And the stories he's weaving, you know, he's probably selling to them pretty good. And again, these people are in college. They're doing their own thing. And so a lot of it's not registering as, and even his daughter, who in my opinion is very brainwashed in this situation and just as much of a victim, you know, she's backing him. So it's going to seem somewhat normal to these other kids in this dorm. Now, also, like a lot of young people, a lot of them have a lot of things going on. You know, depression, questioning sexuality, general stuff that comes with being, you know, that age, going to school, what am I going to do with the rest of my life, yada, yada, yada. Well, Larry begins to counsel these kids, and y'all, I'm using the term counsel very lightly. He basically been talking to them. He's acting almost like this father type role in the situation. To me, it sounded like these sessions that he had were very similar to what we heard with the Manson tribe and what they described, where, you know, Manson would give people drugs and they would go on these like all night long, you know, intellectual conversations, let's discuss life, and everyone thought he was God. So, you know, these kids are saying, you know what, he's ordering expensive takeout food, he's cooking us steaks outside, he cleans up after us. He was basically like a house father, which again is very bizarre to me, but nonetheless, it's how they were rolling. Now, at nighttime, he would either sleep in a blow-up mattress in Talia's room or like on the sofa in the commons area. Now, I'm sorry, and again, we're going to get into it in a second, what I think about that and what the school had to say. That right there sets off so many alarms and red flags. That is just wrong on so many levels. You know, if he's sitting here talking about all these major connections and I have this and I have that, why are you living with your daughter in a dorm room? I mean, it doesn't even make sense. So let's talk about some of the victims here. So we have Daniel, who is questioning his sexuality. We have Claudia, we have Santos, and we have Isabella. So at one point, Isabella like goes to a breakup and then she has some other boyfriend or something like that. Well, Larry starts sleeping in her room after this major breakup. And basically he's trying to say like, oh, she's lonely, she needs someone, she needs this father figure. And like the boyfriend at the time was like, are you crazy? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not cool with this. And essentially Larry's like, well, you're the perverted one, I'm not sleeping with her. You know, but even people were like, well, look, we saw them like kind of like a little too close. It was a little bit weird. You know, it was definitely not a father-daughter type role. And anyways, that's not your daughter. So now this escalates. Before winter break, when everyone has to leave, Larry calls Isabella's family, her mother. He says, look, Isabella was molested when she was a kid. If she comes home, it is going to trigger her and she's probably going to kill herself. So she's not coming home. And he basically blames this all on the mother. Now, you can imagine this did not go over well. Imagine a stranger calling home and over your kid's college and saying your child's not coming home because they were molested as a kid and it's all your fault. So they're staying with me, someone you've never heard of probably. I mean, that would borderline be calling the police. And that's where Larry operates, is in the gray shadows of legality. And he's also a master manipulator. This man has wiggled his way out of plenty of situations and conned his way into many more. So he knows exactly what to do. So at this point, Larry packs his daughter up, her boyfriend, another friend, and they go and stay in an apartment owned by one of Larry's friends named Shen. So when they're in this apartment, Talia and her boyfriend sleep in one room, and Larry and Isabella sleep in another. So, I mean, to me, I'm reading into it, they were basically living as couples at this point. There is so much toxicity with that, I can't even get you there. But it is what it is. Remember, all of these people are legal adults. So, you know, that's another issue going on with this, is it's like in the eyes of the law, they're making a choice to be with him. Now, Talia's boyfriend was like, look, this dude is crazy. He was like, he controlled everything, sleeping, eating, what we thought, what we did. He made me quit smoking. He made me go off my antipsychotic drugs. So, I mean, this is a telltale sign. I mean, this guy was controlling every dynamic of these kids' minds, thoughts, bodies, and lives. Now, after winter break, the boyfriend was like, I am done, and he broke up with Talia. Don't quite blame him. Now, during these breaks is when they would stay at this apartment owned by Shen. Lee Shen is the actual name. So they would stay at those breaks in between that, but they would come back to the campus when school was back in session. So spring semester rolls around. They go back to the dorm area. They're living there. And at this point, Larry starts doing like these family meetings with people, these family counseling sessions. These basically become mandatory. He does presentations, he does lectures, he talks about philosophy, he talks about Q4P. This is the quest for potential, and it's basically a philosophy that's based on the idea that all energy in the universe is built around a quest for potential. So he's doing these mandatory meetings. Now there's another girl in the mix named Claudia, and she starts hearing this and she's like, I kind of like what he's talking about. So she begins doing private sessions with him, which just flies all over me. Can you imagine the things that he's probably poisoning her mind with? Now, her friends kind of described her as like this person that wanted to be a little bit more exciting than she already was. But then these same people were like, after she started doing those private sessions, she was like a totally different person. She was like fake happy. She's like posting about the Marines on her social media all the time. And then she also is like telling people, look, I think I'm schizophrenic, because Larry had basically diagnosed her as schizophrenic. So then eventually another guy joins, Daniel. This is the guy that was questioning his sexuality. And Larry's like, no. You're not gay, son. I can tell. So basically, Daniel ends up being like, oh my God, this guy's the Mecca. I'm moving in. And he does so. He moves in for the summer, and he moves in with Larry and the two girls, Talia and Isabella. This is at Lee Shen's apartment during the summer break. Now, Daniel says, I didn't want to go back home, and that was my alternative. And he's basically like, look, I joined a cult because I didn't know how to find housing in New York. We'll leave that one alone. So at one point, Larry basically decides that I guess he's going to like ungay Daniel or whatever. And he takes this interest in like, you know, fixing him or whatever. So his idea to do this is to bring Daniel into the bedroom with him and Isabella and coach Isabella and Daniel on having sex. This obviously becomes a regular thing, and even Larry joins in sometimes, and even he invites the landlord Li Shen to join in too. Y'all, it's so bad that when Daniel and Isabella go overseas to study abroad, Larry has them meet up via Skype or whatever and coaches them having sex via Skype while they're overseas. I mean, if that does not tell you the power that he had over these people, I'm just like, what? I mean, that was your chance to get away. Like, you know, it doesn't make any sense, I know, but it's so frustrating because, I mean, the damage that he caused to these poor kids is irreversible in my opinion. Now, when Daniel comes back, when both of them come back, but when Daniel does, you know, his parents are like, oh my God. Like, he was so pro Larry that he basically was like, if you're not for Larry and like my life and all this kind of stuff, like y'all are gonna go out of the picture. Like, I'm done with y'all. Now, other parents echoed the same attitude as well. And so here's the tricky thing. Again, legally, these people are adults. So they have made a decision. Whether, you know, they've been coerced or not is almost irrelevant in the eyes of the law. They've made this decision to be around this person that at this time it hasn't been proven that he is committing crimes, any of this stuff. And so in their parents' and families' minds, it's like, well, they're choosing this guy over us, even though it's clear to the parents something is incredibly wrong here. So my heart goes out to them in that way because I can only imagine the frustration and fear they were going through. Now, Larry obviously, most likely, and did have a violent streak. He did something one time where he made this contraption that he forced Daniel to put around his genitals, and he tightened it until it cut into his flesh. Another guy he would put in a chokehold until he passed out. So, I mean, this guy not only was doing all sorts of other abuse, but physical abuse as well. He was abusing them on all levels. Now, another example of the power that Larry had is through another victim named Santos, who came to live in the apartment. Now, Santos had two sisters, Felicia and Yalitza. Now, they weren't even living around the area at the time. Felicia was a Harvard graduate. She had a medical degree from Columbia. She had started her residency in LA when she started talking to Larry on the phone. She ends up giving up her residency and moving in with Larry to start a romantic relationship. So that right there, it's like, wait a second, this is a medical doctor, you know, someone who's doing all this major stuff in academia and the world of medicine, and they just, you know, seemingly drop it all to move across country to move in with this guy. So the juice that he was selling was potent. Here's the other thing. At the same time, Larry is extorting huge amounts of money out of these kids and their families. So he would basically claim that they broke stuff. He was doing all of this crazy stuff, like renovations to Li Shen's apartment that he didn't get permission for. There was other residences. He actually had one here in North Carolina in Pinehurst. And I'm just like, what is up with Pinehurst all of a sudden? It's not that far from where I live. And I actually feel kind of dirty once I found out that some of this stuff took place there. But Larry would claim that these kids broke stuff in the apartment and whatnot, and he would make them email him like an itemized list, basically saying like, dear Mr. Ray, I apologize. I broke these items in your house and they're each worth this much money. I owe this much to you. So Santos, who I just told you about, went to his parents with a $50,000 bill. Now, you can imagine, first of all, I have several things about this. First of all, I'm like, okay, that one, if I did that to my parents, first of all, they wouldn't have the money to pay that off, number one. Number two, they would be like, who in the blue hell is Larry? I mean, that would be, no, that's just absolutely not broken on so many levels. So here's the deal though. Obviously, his parents had the money, and this is another area where Larry knew who to victimize. You know, because obviously a lot of these kids, they were probably coming from like households with money in them and whatnot to be able to go to this college. So his dad tries to go to the apartment in New York to say like, what in the hell has my son done? Yeah, like, did he trash your apartment? Well, Larry won't let him come in to the actual apartment. He like blocks him down the door. And so the father is basically like, look, I mean, we were afraid for our son's safety. So they end up giving him as much money as they they can. Now, just for Santos, his parents, like, we ended up giving him, like, at least, like, $200,000 over several years. We had to sell our house. And even they did the obvious. They went to the NYPD and were like, hello? Yeah, but the New York Police Department was like, look, your son's well over 18. Like, you know what I mean? We can't do anything about it. It's not a minor anymore, technically. And that was just one victim's extortion story. There's many others. Now, also, a couple of the victims ended up trying to kill themselves. One of them, like, overdosed in a bottle of Tylenol. Now, for both of the victims, though, each family described showing up to the hospital and not being allowed to see their own child unless Larry was present. Can you imagine how pissed off that would make you? Now, these kids, at least some of them, Daniel, Talia, and Isabella, they graduated back in 2013. So this is, like, not that long ago that this took place. Santos didn't graduate. Claudia graduated a semester late. Now, Claudia's parents basically got divorced over the whole issue with Larry. Now, Claudia would go on to end up working, like, as an escort and basically prostituting herself out for Larry, in part to pay him back for damages he alleged that she caused at his Pinehurst, North Carolina residence. Basically, the Father of the Year award goes to anyone but him. So those are the main aspects of the crime. And y'all, I'm not joking. It's like everywhere you turn with this, there's another layer to it. I highly implore reading the articles. Now, look, the biggest question we have is, what in the hell did Sarah Lawrence have to say for themselves? So the Dean of Student Life at Sarah Lawrence, Alan Green, actually met with Claudia's parents. Her parents initially were like, the second we heard that he was living there, like, they were at the school, as most parents would be. I mean, come on. And shockingly, he told her parents, you know what, I've had other complaints about him, but my hands are tied because we can't prohibit a father from visiting his daughter. Last I checked, there is a huge difference between visiting your daughter and moving in and exploiting all of her friends. Now, I'm going to read to you the statement that Sarah Lawrence put out about this. Sarah Lawrence College has just learned of the indictment of a former parent in the Southern District of New York. The charges contained in the indictment are serious, wide-ranging, disturbing, and upsetting. As always, the safety and well-being of our students and alumni is a priority for the college. In April 2019, New York Magazine published a range of accusations about this former parent. At that time, the college undertook an internal investigation regarding the specific activities alleged in the article to have occurred on our campus in 2011. The investigation did not substantiate those specific claims. We have not been contacted by the Southern District of New York, but will of course cooperate in their investigation to the full extent of the law if invited to do so. Heads should roll at Sarah Lawrence, as far as I'm concerned. Again, if any remote bit of this comes back as true, you know, innocent until proven guilty, I am allowing room for that. It's shocking to me that a college would allow this to take place, especially after receiving complaints about it. To me, it would not take that much to figure out that a father is living on the damn campus. I mean, come on. I mean, how out of touch with your students are you? I can't imagine all of these people making this up. So, I could go on forever about this one. Again, Abducted in Plain Sight Part 2, Sarah Lawrence edition. So, we're going to follow this. Again, it's federal, so it's not as out there as other situations, crimes are. But we will be keeping our eye on it. Anyways, thank you for hanging out for this whole video. I appreciate it. Check the links out in the description for further reading. And I'll talk to you soon.